Hello. How are y'all doing? Good. I'm Johnny, and I am not from Cape Town, as you might pick up from this accent. But I'm going to tell you guys a little secret. Just happened about 45 minutes ago. I received an email from my immigration lawyer, and I'm officially a permanent resident of South Africa. Literally, that happened 30 minutes ago. I got the email. I was so excited. Whoops. I want to start off by talking about my journey, though, from Unequal Scenes, but also about my journey with African Drone and Milliphoto, my other two photography projects and sort of organizations, and give you guys a background in how I see how creatives can affect social change. Okay? This is a photograph we all know very well, I'm assuming, unless you're from out of town. Maybe you flew 36 hours to get here, but you probably still saw this scene flying in, right? This is Cape Town. This is the beautiful Table Mountain that I am in love with. It's probably a lot of the reason I'm still here, honestly. I love this mountain. And hiking is a passion of mine. I came here 8 years ago to go to the University of Cape Town. And once I graduated with a master's degree in anthropology, I started my photography business here, Milliphoto. And what I wanted to do initially was nothing about social activism or change. It was literally about creating compelling, beautiful videos. And so I bought myself a drone. This is 2016. This is the DJI-inspired drone. Not many people had this in 2016. And I went to Table Mountain, and I went on a hike with my friends. So I'm going to play you a little video of that video that I shot in April 2016. I love that hike, by the way. It's kind of an advanced hike. But so my friend saw that video, right? I put it onto YouTube. My friend who grew up here, Mike, he saw that video. He realized it was Table Mountain, and then he said, "Wow, Johnny, I've never seen Table Mountain look like that before." And that to me was the light bulb moment when I realized that the drone had the ability to change people's perspectives on things. It had the ability to change people's perspectives on things that they had known exactly what it looks like from the moment they were born. There's probably a lot of Cape Townians in this audience, right? You're not raising your hand, but you should. So you all know exactly what those three peaks look like. It's on the bumper stickers. But he saw it from a different perspective. That was the light bulb moment where I went, well, hold on. In my anthropology courses, and just as a foreigner coming to Cape Town, this was really shocking to me. It's obviously shocking to all of us, but this was completely different than where I grew up, where you had pinelands and Langa and Bantuhul right next to one another that were so segregated just 25 years ago and are still so segregated today. And I thought maybe we could take the drone, I could take the drone, and I could look at those divides in a creative way. I went to Masapumalele, nearby where I surf a lot in Long Beach, and this is the photo that came out of it. Maybe you guys have seen this photo before. This photo from Masapumalele and Lake Michelle near Noordhoek went completely viral. This whole story is about my photo project going viral on Facebook. And the comments, when I woke up the next morning after posting that, you can see the shares and the comments after 24 hours, were incredibly sort of striking to me. There were people that were super supportive of the project, and there were people that were super against the project. And as a person who wasn't from here, and still, even to this day, I feel sometimes uncomfortable talking about issues of race and power and land and politics in a country, well, I guess it is now partially my country, because I'm a permanent resident, yeah. But still, back then, 3 years ago, it was uncomfortable. And because I said, today I'm starting a project on inequality, a photo project, people were like, when's the next photo coming in the project? So I was like, oh God, well, okay, this is really going to turn into a project. I've got to keep going, right? So I went to Hout Bay. Hout Bay is not too far away from the first site. I took this photo, posted it on Facebook. And literally within 2 days, I realized that I had tapped into some sort of deep vein of imagery reflecting sort of a deep-seated emotional unease in this country specifically that was all of a sudden being let out. It was like poking a needle into a vein and watching the blood come out. I mean, not to make too gross of a metaphor. This is Strand, just outside of Cape Town. Very quickly decided to go to the rest of the cities in South Africa, the major cities, so Johannesburg, and then Durban. If you've looked at my website at all, you probably know this image. Just real briefly, this golf course is actually named after a really famous Indian golfer named Papua Sugalam. When I tell this story, a lot of people have never heard of him, even South Africans, but he was an incredibly talented and amazing Indian golfer in the 60s in Durban, and he actually beat Gary Player at a major international golfing event. Gary Player being the white South African golfer who was the best in the world at that time, or one of the best. And it was kind of a upset. People were shocked. When he went to go get his trophy in the clubhouse in Durban, there was a rainstorm that came in. And they went to go give him his trophy, but it was raining, and everyone ran into the clubhouse. And they stopped him, and it was a whites-only clubhouse. So he actually had to get his trophy outside in the rain. And that photo went around the world. It became sort of a rallying cry for anti-apartheid sanctions, especially on sporting events. And the government targeted him and took away his passport. He couldn't compete in golfing events anymore. So this golf course was named after him after the change in '94, yet there's an informal settlement that exists right next to it. Papua Sugalam, Papwa Sewgolum. I was lucky enough to, through a variety of creative sort of partnerships, go around the world. This project has gone to Mexico, India, the lower right-hand corner is Baltimore in my home country of America, and then Kenya, and also Tanzania. And it's been incredibly successful, culminating in this cover, which probably a lot of you have seen. It was on sale here. And the title, The World's Most Unequal Country. This isn't hyperbole. The World Bank released a report showing that, in fact, South Africa, this country, is the world's most unequal country. But how is this helping anything? So this is where I want to kind of talk a little bit more in depth about how imagery and how creatives can help actually drive change. Because I get this question a lot. And I also get the question of I get the question of what am I doing personally to end inequality? It keeps jumping. I know a lot of photographers who get asked this, right? I get a lot of social activists who come to me and they say, yes, I've heard this exact same thing, especially when it comes to issues of funding or it comes to issues of growing as part of a team. Photographers are always seen as documenters. They're not seen as integral parts of actually driving that change. But of course, pictures can change the world. And creatives who are also activists, like myself, know this intimately. So I'm going to answer these questions in just a moment. But first, I want to help you understand how photographs and other creative projects can change the world. So let's break down exactly what I'm doing with creativity and with photographs. This is Sonia. Sonia is a friend of mine, and she's a dreamer. I'm also a dreamer. This was part of a project I did on mapping people using drones and creating point clouds out of their bodies. But I'm also a small business owner. I founded an NPO called African Drone. I'm a political science graduate. I do everything myself. I'm not really part of a big team. I used to work in Washington, D.C. as part of a defense contractor where the most creative people that I worked with were making animations on PowerPoints. I'm not the typical idea of what a creative industry person looks like. I didn't even pick up a camera until I was 30. But I do understand that what makes compelling, powerful imagery for activism specifically is more than just the pure beauty. You also have to understand that humans aren't rational actors. And this is important. We don't just take in data and make a decision. There's a narrative that's created inside all of our heads. There's an emotional response that's created with imagery that allows us to enter an imaginary, to then create decisions afterwards based on the feelings that we receive from that imaginary. Now, I know that sounds a bit, let's say, airy-fairy. But remember, we live in a visual culture, right? All of the input that we get, all the stimulation that we get, all the media we get is coming through our screens, which are ubiquitous now. So visuals, actually creating the scenes that we make sense of the world with, are incredibly ubiquitous, incredibly important. And not only are we bombarded with ubiquitous imagery, it's professional imagery. So why am I harping on this? It's because when you create imagery to drive social change, you also have to create good imagery. So professional creativity helps drive the message that you want to drive. It helps create that narrative better. The best part about Unequal Scenes was I did this almost subconsciously. Creating that aesthetic could be shared easily on small screens like mobile phones and iPads and that such. And that helped it go viral, which I think is really important when we start talking about how do we want to drive our own individual projects. The second part of the puzzle, so the first one is creating the compelling imagery. That's the C. The second part is the acknowledge. Does anyone recognize this photograph? So this photo won the World Press Photo Award for this year, 2019. And I call it acknowledgement because acknowledgement in traditional cultures means more than just seeing someone. It means listening to them. It means understanding where they came from. It means building a relationship. So with imagery, with creative imagery, relational trust is incredibly powerful. If you can create a relational with the image, you can build a narrative much more effectively with your audience. How is this image relevant to your lives, sitting here in Cape Town? This is a small Honduran girl who's just been separated from her parents on the US-Mexico border from a photographer named John Moore who is taking photographs of the migration issues. My answer is yes, it can, and yes, it should. My work and the valuable other work of creatives, journalists, organizers, artists is to create those common narratives. The opposite of this state actually is what people call poverty porn, right? Poverty porn meaning gratuitous uses of imagery to provoke or sensationalize, but without any context or deeper meaning. This is the opposite of what I'm trying to do. It's the opposite of what creatives are trying to do, and there's a big difference. Lastly, creative imagery needs to be actionable. So we had C. We need to create imagery that's beautiful, that's compelling, that follows the design of the components of good design and good composition. We need to acknowledge it. It needs to be relevant. It needs to be relevant to our lives. That involves nuance, context, writing, and a team of actors to help us do that. Lastly, actionable. How can we take images of the drought, the Cape Town drought, and actually do something with them? This is also a criticism that a lot of photographers get. Why are you just running around taking photos without actually doing anything? But there are ways to use these images as interventions into actually actioning these issues. And I'd argue that imagery, compelling drone imagery, compelling other types of imagery of Tewaterskloof Dam, actually was a big driver for day zero and a big driver for our actions changing, which we all did. Pat yourself on the back. We did significantly lessen our reduction, but then it also started raining, to be perfectly fair. That's, thank God, right? So C, acknowledge, act. C, acknowledge, act. Is it interesting? Is it relevant? And is it actionable? This is the creative method that you should be asking of any creatives that you work with, and this is what I ask when I work with the spectrum of actors that I work with. I mentioned that humans aren't rational actors, and you might be thinking, well, hold on, I'm a rational actor. I know some of you are definitely thinking that right now. I take in evidence, I take in data, I process the best course of action, I move towards that. You might be thinking, I understand the need for window dressing to accompany my scientific research, for example, but this is missing my point. It's a crucial point of how we not just create narratives, but how we receive narratives. Humans aren't machines. Humans aren't computers. We're fickle. I think the previous speaker made a great point at this. We have a plasticity of our brains. We're prone to emotions. We're biased. We're easily swayed, and we use our primary sense to understand the world, which is our eyes. So if you think outside of narrative right or wrong and talk about issues of emotions, the data is clear. Our political decisions, our personal decisions, humans are moved to act in an irrational way, in an emotional way. Studies show that we give to charities whom serve communities that we look like, that we're familiar with. We give to interests that we understand and that we take in part ourselves. I'm not doing this, by the way. There's a ghost in the machine. Studies show that our aid doesn't go equally to end all the suffering in the world. We don't give an equal amount of money based on our income to the most terrible problems in the world. We give it based on how we feel, right? This presentation isn't, I'm not going to debate the merits of empathy in this argument. If you want a really good book on that, you should read Against Empathy by Paul Bloom, about how to harness that power for positive social action. And so I want to tell you a little story about where I came from. I flew in today. I landed at Cape Town about 5 hours ago from Jordan. And I was photographing Syrian refugees in a camp called Zatari. which is the biggest camp in Jordan. These are Syrian refugees. When you think Syrian refugee, what do you think of? I should have asked you this question before I showed the slide. Because these women are beautiful and amazing. Men? I often thought of that boy that drowned on the Greek beach. The plight of war. Recently in the news now, the Turks are invading Kurdistan. There's a lot going on in Syria. And when I met these women, there's men associated with them as well. There's students that we were working with in Zatari. When I met them at first, I expected a certain thing. And Rima, the woman in the middle, was my translator. So there was 15 of these students. She was my translator. She was translating for me about this photography project and my aims for it and what I wanted out of it and what I wanted to do. And at the end of her translating for me, and this was like 20 minutes, and it was kind of like a really serious situation where I was explaining how I needed their consent and ethically how I was going to share the photographs, and they blah, blah, blah. And it was really heavy, and everyone was like not smiling. And I was done, and I said, is there anything else that I should say? And she turns to me and she goes, that'll be $20 Jordanian for my time. And for a moment, I stood there, I was like, what? And then she started laughing. And I realized she was making a joke. She was making a joke that like I needed to pay her for her translation services, which to me completely shattered me for two reasons. One, that the power dynamic that existed there of me, this relatively affluent white foreigner coming in and taking photos of them, would make her feel cowed so that she wouldn't talk about money with me or even make jokes about money because of the fact that they had so much less and I had so much more. But then also the fact that what I had expected of Syrian refugees was that they didn't have humor in the first place, that they would have never made a joke. And that completely, and by the way, I've been doing this project for quite a while now, almost 4 years, and that still threw me, that I have so much bias going into projects and so much reflection still to do. How can we as creatives help let me not say the word destroy. How can we as creatives help create alternative narratives that we can use? Early childhood development, refugees, climate change, the SDGs. I decided to photograph them radically differently based on that experience, and I think the humanity that comes across in the photos, which hopefully will be released in not too distant of the future, really, really shines through. I wanted to tell that story also because of the fact that there's a spectrum of actors. These are the people that I was working with in Jordan: a doctor, a writer, a lawyer, a community organizer. 2 of these people are South Africans. They're amazing people. We're all part of the Atlantic Fellows program. I'm not up here telling you that creatives can save the world, and I'm not up here telling you that creatives are going to change radically your particular business or your organization. But I am saying that creatives are a vital part of changing that narrative, just like everyone else is. Taking that data and matching it up with compelling portraiture, or taking a drone photo of climate change or inequality and matching it up with the data with action that you can take afterwards, that's what's going to help us change the world. I guarantee it. These are some of the projects that I've been working on recently. Unequal Scenes and Milliphoto are kind of photography brands, and African Drone is my NPO. That focuses specifically on drone issues, if I can say that. We have 34 countries in Africa that we're represented in and over 600 pilots. We have a big project coming up in Rwanda. If any of you are interested, just find me afterwards. One more. Creativity creates a space for the imaginary, not replacing imagination. The imaginary is a place where we go to feel dreams, to understand what might be different, and to experience emotions that we can then take with us after that imaginary is created, that we remember. This could maybe be best seen, for example, if you think about a lover, or your first experience doing a variety of things. How does that color what you think about that thing now? How did my first experience seeing a Syrian refugee dead on a beach, drowned, color my experience of seeing those refugees then? And how can we change that? I'll leave you with this last slide, which is Kenny Tokwe in Hout Bay. He's a community leader there. He lives right on that border. This is the fence between the affluent Tirbos Kloof section of Hout Bay and Imazama Yetu. But there's an optimism in him that I strive to get across in his portrait, and I hope that I did, that I haven't talked about, that's extremely important. I was recently at the UN General Assembly where climate change was top of the list of what people were talking about. Everyone was talking about climate change. And everyone had a 10 to 20-year horizon in the narrative that they were talking about. 10 to 20 years meaning we have to stop climate change catastrophe from ruining the world for the future. That was it. And while I completely 100% am behind stopping climate catastrophe, changing our actions, being more sustainable, the future narrative 50, 100 years out, and the positive future narrative is something that I'm not seeing being created very much. And that's something that I leave you with, is in your work, what sort of positive social narratives can we increasingly build to build a hope for the future 50, 100 years out for our kids, for our future generations, that's different than just stopping what we're doing now to avoid catastrophe. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.